Dealer paid $75 to haul it away. Voice file, Tractor Junkie. USA. SSML narration. 40-minute runtime. It was still dark when Ray Kowalski pulled the chain on the shop light. 4:47 in the morning on the 14th of September, 2019. The barn smelled of old motor oil, dried corn dust, and in the damp cold that settles into northwest Iowa fields in the first weeks of fall. He hadn't slept. He'd lain on top of the covers in his work clothes for 2 hours and given up just before 4, walking the 200 feet from his house to the machine shed without turning on the outdoor lights. He knew the path. He had been walking it for 31 years. On the workbench in front of him, laid out on a clean section of moving blanket, was what remained of the engine from a 1938 Minneapolis-Moline UDLX Comfortractor. 4 days earlier, he had pulled the engine from the machine. Today, he was going to crack open the block, and the valve cover had already come off 2 nights before, revealing a rocker arm assembly frozen into a rust-bonded sculpture. One push rod was bent 40 degrees out of plane. 2 intake valves had seized solid in their guides. He had expected most of that. He had not expected what he was about to find beneath it. Ray Kowalski was 63 years old. He had spent 3 decades as a machinist at a tool and die operation in Algona, Iowa, before retiring in 2015. He was not a man given to dramatic moments. He spoke in short sentences. He drove a pickup with 212,000 miles on the odometer. His collection of vintage iron, 14 tractors in various states of restoration, occupied most of the back half of his property on the north edge of Estherville. He had owned some valuable machines. He had never owned anything remotely close to what this one might be. He had started the engine teardown the way he always started, methodically, without assumptions, photographing every component before moving it. He worked counterclockwise from the front of the block, documenting valve clearances, noting bore wear against the cylinder walls, checking for casting cracks. It was during that second night's work, while cleaning debris from the recesses beneath where the valve cover had seated, that he found it. A folded piece of stiff paper, not quite cardstock, not quite plain paper, wedged into the narrow gap between the head gasket rail and the inner casting wall. It had been there so long that it had taken on the deep ochre color of the iron around it, all but invisible until he played a flashlight at a low angle directly across the surface. He mistook it at first for dried gasket material. He nudged it with a pick. It didn't crumble. He worked a finger behind it and pulled very carefully, and it came free intact. That was the first surprise. Whatever this was, it had survived sealed under that valve cover for 81 years without disintegrating. He set it on the moving blanket and looked at it without touching it for a full 2 minutes. He picked it up with both hands, held his breath, and opened it flat on the bench. What he read in the next 30 seconds would change everything he thought he knew about this machine and rewrite the early history of serial number 310537. The document was a Minneapolis-Moline factory build card. He recognized the format immediately. The company name stamped in block letters across the top, a 2-line production identifier running beneath it, the field boxes filled in with ink that had browned but not faded past legibility. Serial number 310537. Model designation UDLX. Engine KED. Build month September 1938. And then the line he read 3 times before he let himself believe it. Destination MM District, Estherville, Iowa. Assignment Zone Demonstration Use. Ray Kowalski sat down on his shop stool. Not dramatically. He sat because his legs suggested it, and the tractor in the back of his barn, the one a dealer had paid $75 to haul away, the one a salvage man had sold him for $400, was a factory zone manager demonstrator, one of a small number of UDLX Comfortractors that Minneapolis-Moline had assigned to their district sales offices in 1938 and 1939. Not a farm tractor, company property. And this one, serial 310537, had never left the district it was assigned to. and it had been in northwest Iowa since the month it was built. This story begins in a factory in Hopkins, Minnesota, in the summer of 1937. But to understand what that document meant, we have to go back. If you want to see how a sealed factory document, hidden inside a seized engine for 81 years, rewrites everything anybody knew about a machine that a dealer gave away for $75, here's what I ask. See that subscribe button? It's our exchange. Your way of saying this reached you. Hit subscribe if this story resonated, drop a like if it moved you, and tell us in the comments what you know about the Minneapolis-Moline UDLX, or whether you've ever pulled an old engine apart and found something inside that had no business being there. Back to northwest Iowa, and then back to 1937. The story of the UDLX Comfortractor begins not on a farm but in a conference room. A Minneapolis-Moline's planning department had commissioned a consumer survey, one of the first of its kind in American agricultural equipment history, asking farmers across the Midwest what they most wanted from their next tractor. 50%. Half of all farmers surveyed said they wanted a tractor with an enclosed cab. That was the mandate. Minneapolis-Moline already made the Model U, a respected four-plow tractor refined through the mid-1930s into a reliable workhorse. The company's engineers now had to figure out how to put a real cab on it. Not a canvas canopy, not a folding windscreen. An automobile-grade enclosed cab with glass, with heat, with weather protection that a farmer could actually live inside during a Minnesota November. Testing happened in two very different climates. The company ran prototypes in the Mojave Desert, proving out the engine's cooling capacity under extreme heat load. They also ran cold weather testing through upper Midwest winters. By 1938, the engineering team had signed off on a machine that weighed 6,400 pounds, rode on 34 by 8 rear tires and 6.00-16 fronts, and then was powered by a 283.7 cubic inch overhead valve 4-cylinder engine, producing 41.5 belt horsepower and 37.8 drawbar horsepower. At 1,275 revolutions per minute, what Minneapolis-Moline built in 1938 had no precedent on any American farm. Yet the UDLX was introduced at a demonstration event that drew approximately 12,000 farmers. What they unveiled was a tractor that read like a piece of automotive luxury dropped into an agricultural catalog. The cab was wood-framed, sheathed in steel. Every pane of glass was automotive-grade safety glass. At the dashboard was a full instrument panel, speedometer, clock, temperature gauge, oil pressure indicator. The heater drew warmth from the engine. The radio was built in. So was the cigarette lighter, the ashtray, the electric horn, the sun visor, and the rear view mirror. And the 5-speed synchromesh transmission gave the UDLX a road gear capable of 40 miles per hour at 1,785 revolutions per minute, faster than most cars drove on paved rural routes in 1938. A farmer could plow in the morning and take his wife to dinner 40 miles away in the evening, arriving without diesel on his coat and with the news on the radio the whole way. That was the pitch. The machine was prairie gold, that particular warm amber yellow, with chromed bumper and hubcaps, and a profile unlike anything else that had ever come out of a farm equipment plant. It was, without qualification, the most ambitious tractor ever built in the United States to that point. The UDLX had one problem: the price. In 1938, a standard Minneapolis-Moline Model U cost approximately $1,000. A comparable John Deere was in the same range. A new Ford Deluxe Tudor sedan, an actual automobile, sold new for $725. And the UDLX Comfortractor was priced at $2,155. More expensive than a new Cadillac. The year 1938 was also not a forgiving one for expensive durable goods. The United States had emerged from the worst of the Great Depression into a brief recovery period, only to be pushed back into a sharp economic recession beginning in late 1937. Farm incomes contracted. Banks tightened lending. Yet the farmers who had attended that 12,000-person demonstration event watched the UDLX roll across the field with genuine admiration, and then went home and bought something else. At Minneapolis-Moline sold approximately 150 UDLX Comfortractors total, serial numbers 310501 through approximately 310625, before the company made the decision to stop. Unsold units were called back to the factory. Most of those that shipped to actual buyers went to custom threshermen who could tow a thresher at 40 miles per hour between jobs and arrive looking like professionals, and a handful, a documented but rarely discussed handful, were assigned to Minneapolis-Moline's own district demonstration fleet. At the zone demonstration program at Minneapolis-Moline was not widely documented, but it was real. The company maintained regional district offices across the upper Midwest, in Minnesota, Iowa, the Dakotas, and Nebraska, where sales managers and zone representatives worked the territory, calling on dealers, and attending county fairs, making the case for Minneapolis-Moline equipment. The UDLX was designed to announce itself. A zone manager arriving at a dealership in a Comfortractor made a statement that no catalog ever could. The Estherville District covered a substantial section of northwest Iowa, Emmett, Palo Alto, Dickinson, and adjacent counties. We know from the factory build card that serial number 310537 was assigned to this district in September 1938 and designated for zone demonstration use. 310537 was among the earlier built UDLX tractors. It had the original KED engine designation. The 5-speed synchronized gearbox was factory set. At the radio and heater were original equipment installations. This was a company machine. It went to northwest Iowa. It stayed. At some point between late 1939 and 1941, serial number 310537 was transferred out of the demonstration fleet. What is documented, through county equipment registration records that Ray would eventually locate in the Emmett County Courthouse, is that a UDLX tractor appeared on the property of the Harmon family farm outside Armstrong, Iowa, in the early 1940s. Vernon Harmon operated the tractor through the 1940s and into the 1950s. It pulled plows, it hauled grain to the elevator in Estherville on roads that had originally been built to demonstrate. The UDLX's machinery log shows it was last used for active field work in 1963. Yes, after that, it appears only once, in a handwritten note from 1967, when Vernon Harmon noted it as stored back corner. It sat, the way machines do when the work outpaces them and nothing happens to prompt a decision. The newer tractors arrived on the Harmon property through the 1960s and 1970s. The UDLX acquired the particular stillness of objects left too long in one place, the kind where rust builds incrementally across decades into something that looks permanent. The cab persisted. The frame persisted. Had the block persisted? Vernon Harmon died in 1979. The farm passed to his son, Dale, who had grown up on it but had other work by then, a sales position in Mason City, a house there, children in school there. Dale Harmon kept the land leased and managed the property at a distance. At the UDLX was not touched. It is possible Dale Harmon did not know exactly what it was. Dale Harmon died in 2004. The property was handled by his estate over the following years. In 2018, the estate finally moved toward liquidation, and a farm equipment dealer from Estherville, a man named Larry Vance, was called out to look at what remained in the machine sheds. Larry Vance knew tractors. He walked through the sheds in the spring of 2018, noted what was salvageable and what wasn't, and made his assessments. The UDLX was, by that point, in poor condition. Yet the hood had been partially stripped. The carburetor was gone. The seat was gone. He did not know it was one of approximately 150 built, or that surviving examples were selling for 6 figures. He paid $75 for the right to haul it to Hendrick's Salvage on Route 9. And it was a reasonable decision, given everything he knew. Hendrick's salvage occupied a 3-acre lot off Route 9 west of Estherville. Gary Hendrick priced the UDLX at $600 and left it beside the fence. It sat through the summer and fall of 2018. By late spring of 2019, he had dropped the price to $450 and stopped thinking about it. Ray Kowalski drove past Hendrick's salvage routinely. His route to the feed supply in Estherville took him along Route 9, and he had a habit of slowing at the fence to look over whatever was new on the lot. What he saw as he slowed at the gate stopped him completely. The prairie gold color. Even beneath the rust and the dust and the oil film, that particular warm amber yellow was visible on the door panel if you knew what you were looking at. He pulled over, he walked to the fence, and he stood there for approximately 10 minutes without moving. He knew the production history, he knew the serial number range, he knew what surviving examples were bringing at auction. He walked to the office and offered $400 cash on the spot. Gary Hendrick took it without negotiating. Ray trailered the machine home that afternoon, backed it into the barn, and locked the door. The phone calls led to the Minneapolis-Moline Collectors Club, and through them to a man in South Dakota who had been tracking UDLX serial numbers since the early 1980s. Ray read him the serial number, 310537. There was a pause on the line, then, "That one's unaccounted for. Where did you find it?" The serial number tracker confirmed that 310537 had not appeared in any known registry, had not been documented at any show, and had not been reported as destroyed or parted. For the tracker, this was a routine data point to be added to a spreadsheet. For Ray Kowalski, it was the first indication of what he might actually be holding. And the teardown began in August 2019 and proceeded with the same methodical structure Ray applied to every project. He found that the cab, though damaged cosmetically, retained its structural wood framing in better condition than he had expected. The radio mounting bracket was still in place. At the dashboard instrument panel was intact, all 5 gauges present behind cracked glass. The 5-speed transmission turned freely. The engine was seized solid at the cylinders. That was the problem to solve, and that was where the story turned. A seized tractor engine in 1938. Vintage iron is not necessarily a catastrophe. Yet a machinist of Ray Kowalski's background reads a seized engine the way a physician reads symptoms. Not as a final verdict, but as a map of what happened and when. The Minneapolis-Moline KED engine, a 4-cylinder overhead valve unit with a 4.25-inch bore and a 5-inch stroke, that displacing 283.7 cubic inches, was built for agricultural loads at sustained low speeds and was over-engineered by modern standards. The compression ratio was 5.6 to 1. A single Schebler updraft carburetor. It was not a complicated engine. Its failure modes were well understood. What Ray found when he removed the valve cover was consistent with a valve seizure event. One intake valve had welded itself into its guide, likely during a period of operation with marginal lubrication, probably many decades ago. The cylinder walls, when he was finally able to scope them, showed no scoring. No scoring. That changes everything for a machinist. On the morning of September 14th, that sleepless morning, the 4:47 morning, Ray Kowalski was ready to remove the cylinder head. He had the penetrant work done. All head bolts had broken free, which was its own minor miracle in an engine that had been static for more than 50 years. The head came free with a sound like a damp seal releasing. Not dramatic, not violent, just a slow giving way as the gasket separated from the mating surfaces. He lifted it with both hands and set it on a padded section of workbench. The pistons were exposed, dark, coated in decades of combustion residue, and the particular brown varnish that forms when engine oil oxidizes over long periods without circulation. He began cleaning, but he worked methodically from the front of the block, using solvent and brushwork to clear the recesses in the head mating surface. As he worked the solvent into the recess along the head gasket rail, he felt the pick catch on something. He played the flashlight across it. He saw the edge of a folded piece of paper, not disintegrated, not destroyed, present and intact. After 81 years, waiting for exactly this moment, he opened the document the way you open something you know might not survive the opening. Flat hands, no pressure, letting the folds part under their own weight. Yet the paper was rigid with age, but not brittle. It was readable. All of it was readable. Serial number 310537. Model UDLX. Engine KED. Build month September 1938. And then the line he read 3 times before he let himself believe it. Destination District, Estherville, Iowa. Assignment Zone Demonstration Not For Resale. The significance of the zone demonstration designation runs deeper than provenance. Factory demonstration tractors were not farmed. They were not run in fields. They were driven on roads between dealerships and agricultural shows, maintained between engagements, kept in presentable condition. That operating profile has direct mechanical implications. A demonstration machine accumulates road hours, not field hours. When Ray Kowalski sent the cylinder measurements to the machine shop in Algona, the results came back consistent with his prediction. The bores showed wear within factory tolerance, and the shop's recommendation was a hone and ring job, not a bore out. For a tractor of this rarity, originality is not a cosmetic preference. It is the entire point. The build card also provided the pivot for a more complete provenance chain. Within 2 weeks, the serial number had been cross-referenced against 3 separate archives. The company's own surviving production ledgers, the county equipment registration records, and the registry the South Dakota tracker had been maintaining since 1976. Every source aligned. Serial number 310537. Built September 1938. Estherville, Iowa. Zone demonstrator. Unaccounted for in the collector record until September 14, 2019. The restoration of serial number 310537 took Ray Kowalski approximately 14 months. He honed the cylinders himself. He sourced original specification piston rings through Steiner Tractor Parts in Lennon, Michigan. The carburetor, a Schebler updraft unit, was found through a Minneapolis-Moline parts dealer in Minnesota who had held it in inventory for 12 years without a buyer. The cab reconstruction took longer than the engine, yet the wood framing required careful work. Some members had softened at their joints over decades. The steel sheathing was straightened, not replaced. The cab retains its original steel. At the radio, the original AM radio that Minneapolis-Moline had installed at the Hopkins factory in September 1938 was still in its bracket, corroded, non-functional, missing its tuning knob. At a vintage radio restorer in Des Moines assessed it over 3 sessions and determined the core components were salvageable. By the time serial number 310537 rolled out of Ray Kowalski's barn in November 2020 under its own power, the radio was working. Not perfectly, not reliably, but it worked. The heater worked. The electric horn worked. The speedometer needle moved. 82 years after it was built to demonstrate the future to 12,000 Iowa farmers. It was back. What does a tractor like this represent when you step back far enough to see it whole? The UDLX Comfortractor was not a successful product. It sold 150 units in a market that needed hundreds of thousands to justify its development costs. The engineers who designed it were, by any reasonable measure, 80 years ahead of the market. Modern tractor cabs, sealed, climate-controlled, GPS-equipped operator environments that sit atop contemporary agricultural equipment are the direct descendants of the idea that Minneapolis-Moline tried to sell in 1938 for $2,155 and couldn't move. Serial number 310537 is one of approximately 72 to 92 UDLX tractors currently accounted for in the historical registry. Of those, fewer than 30 are in fully restored running condition. At auction, restored examples have brought prices between $100,000 and $175,000. At the $75 haul-away price and the $400 salvage price represent not an error in judgment, but a gap in knowledge, the kind of gap that defines the difference between a dealer and a collector. The factory build card is now preserved in an archival sleeve alongside Ray Kowalski's restoration documentation. But the card is not large. It is smaller than an index card. It survived 8 decades, sealed in an engine, in a barn, on a farm in northwest Iowa, through all of it, intact. It knew what the machine was, even when nobody else did. That is the thing about a build card, and it doesn't forget. Serial number 310537 made its public debut at an antique tractor show in Algona, Iowa in the summer of 2021. Ray Kowalski drove it there himself. 41 miles on rural Iowa roads, the original AM radio pulling in a faint signal somewhere around Bancroft, the original heater doing nothing in July, the speedometer steady at 34 miles per hour. He parked it in the Minneapolis-Moline display section, opened the rear cab door, and stepped aside. The crowd that formed was immediate. An older man put his head through the cab door and said nothing for about 30 seconds, and then said, "I'll be." That was the whole sentence. The build card is in a frame now at Ray's home in Estherville, not in a drawer, on a wall. The tractor is not for sale. That much is not complicated. What keeps people talking is the question of what else is out there. How many barn floors, how many salvage yards, how many fields have machines in them that don't know yet what they are? This one never forgot what it was. We just had to go find it. If this story moved you, if this machine, this card, this 81-year secret reached something, please like this video and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories in the record. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and whether you've ever found something nobody expected inside a machine that everyone else had given up on. Yay!